And we're live.
We are live, and this is the Freedom Side here on Breakthrough News. I'm one of your hosts, Eugene Puryear. As always, it is my pleasure to be here alongside my co-host, Rania Khalek. Rania, I don't know why I always say welcome back as if you're a guest, but it just seems like the right thing to say. Welcome back.
I feel like you're saying it because I'm not in the same room with you. So
That
it's a natural response. Plus, I am in a collapsing country, so it sounds like you're like happy to see that I'm still here.
That's
how
I'm
I
definitely
perceive it,
happy
at
to see
least.
that you're still here. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
Well, we will get to Lebanon, your base, in just a little bit, but you're here. That's what's important. And for everyone else who is here with us virtually, thank you for joining us. Of course, if you are watching on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already yet. Hit the bell so that you can get the alerts and follow everything that we're doing here on Breakthrough News. So YouTube, subscribe, hit the bell. If you're not on YouTube, maybe take a second, get on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, also hit the bell so you get the alerts. And if you are watching anywhere else, this would be a great opportunity to go ahead and hit the share button. So whoever, I should say, is following you can be following us. And if you would like, you can certainly become a patron, make a donation to help us keep all the great work going here at Breakthrough News. You can go to patreon.com/Breakthrough News. That's patreon.com/Breakthrough News. So subscribe on YouTube, get the alerts on YouTube, share it wherever you're watching. Make sure you go to patreon.com/Breakthrough News. Well, I will just start, Rania, with what we were mentioning there. Obviously, in Lebanon, where you are right now, some political happenings, as it were. The Prime Minister, Saad Hariri, has resigned. It has become one of the biggest stories in the world in the latter half of today, this afternoon. I'm curious what you think about this. Was it expected? Is it unexpected? And what should people be expecting? I know there's also been protests and other activities happening there in Lebanon and as it concerns the broader social and economic situation.
Yeah, so Saad Hariri, who is the son of the late Prime Minister Rafiq Hariri, he was the Prime Minister of Lebanon in the past, and he was the Prime Minister designate when after the cabinet resigned after the port blast last year. That he's been participating in attempting to form a government for the last 8 months. This is very important for Lebanon to form a government because Lebanon right now has a caretaker government, a caretaker cabinet that's not able to make any real concrete actions on the current economic collapse, which the World Bank has described as one of the worst economic collapse to happen in the last 100 or more years, because it's so terrible and brutal, and it's shocking it's happening, and there's not actually like a war going on. But the point is that Saad Hariri, his family, played a large role in the reason for this collapse. The Hariri family, along with the central bank head Riyad Salemi, helped architect the Lebanese Ponzi scheme economy that was destined to ultimately collapse. And now for the last 8 months, he's been dragging his feet, really playing an obstructionist role in the formation of a government because he wasn't getting his way. And ultimately, there's elections next year. If you kind of think about it, I know people don't really understand Lebanese internal politics, but if you kind of think about it like Republicans and Democrats, when Democrats are in charge and Republicans play that obstructionist role where they make it impossible for the other side to govern until the next election, that's what the Hariri pro-US, pro-Saudi side have been doing for the last 8 months, is really like dragging their feet on the formation of a government so that they can, when the elections happen next year, blame everything that's gone wrong on the current coalition in power, which is a Hezbollah-supported coalition. And so this is very, there's a lot of political game playing here, but ultimately his resignation has crashed the currency even further in Lebanon. There's people blocking streets all across the country because they're really angry. Because without the formation of a government, again, people are really suffering here because of this economic collapse. There's hyperinflation. Prices are out of control. People can't afford anything. The country's so broke, it can't afford to buy fuel. So people are experiencing 20-hour plus a day electricity cuts. I think I saw someone saying that there's more electricity in Gaza than there is in Beirut, the capital of Lebanon. Wow. And Gaza, of course, we know is under siege by Israel. It's that bad. I mean, I'm sitting in a building that has a generator. So I have electricity right now, but anybody who's watched our streams or any of the episodes of my show, Rania Khalek Dispatches, sees almost every episode my electricity shuts off at some point. That's the reality people are dealing with in Lebanon right now. So yeah, it's a disaster, and it's only going to get worse. But I'm here for it.
Yeah, well, no,
So,
I mean, it just speaks to so much. I mean, 2 weeks ago, I believe you were coming to us from Iraq. I mean, it just seems like such a testament to the massive amount of destruction that has been wreaked by U.S. policy in the broader region.
yeah, of course, you can't separate what's happening in Lebanon from everything else happening in the region, particularly the U.S. maximum pressure campaign against Iran, which is actually a maximum pressure campaign of sanctions against Syria as well. That's affecting Iraq, which is where I was experiencing those electricity blackouts when I was coming to you. It's impacting Lebanon. It's really cutting up the region and making it impossible for people to trade with each other. And it's causing these rolling blackouts. It's not just Lebanon, it's Iraq, it's Syria, it's Iran. It's all across the region, and not just Middle East, anywhere where the US is squeezing an adversary country. You've got these blackouts. And that brings us to, one of the topics we're going to be discussing a lot today, which is Cuba. Cuba is being squeezed and has been squeezed for the last 60 years by this US blockade, made worse under Trump, maintained under Biden, to the point where there's these blackouts. There's blackouts in Venezuela, the most oil-rich country in the Western Hemisphere, has electricity blackouts because the US sanctions deny Venezuela access to the chemicals it needs to refine its massive oil reserve, or the oil coming out of its massive reserves. So, it's just every country you look at that's on the State Department hit list or has proximity to it is living in this horrendous nightmare situation where there's food shortages, medicine shortages. I have loved ones in Lebanon who take blood pressure medications, who take cholesterol medications. And they're the luckier ones. There's also people who are cancer patients here, and they can't find their medicines. They can't get chemotherapy. It's the same situation in Syria. It's just on and on and on. So much unbelievable level of suffering because of the US control of financial institutions and using them to squeeze all these countries. And sadly, Americans have no idea.
No, I think you make such a good point. If there's anything, someone gets a hangnail in Cuba, they say, well, oh, it's communism. If someone gets a hangnail in Lebanon, it's Hezbollah. But in Haiti, where there's a US-backed government and the power is also out, people are living in poverty, all these different things, no American media outlet will say, well, this is because of the United States policy towards Haiti to support these governments that do absolutely nothing for people there on the island. And the double standard is just so palpable. I mean, it's almost like it's so in your face that that's why they can lie. Like, it's almost like so brazen that you don't fully see it,
You just made me think, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but you made me think of the numbers, just the numbers alone. I mean, I think one person in Cuba died in clashes with police, and I'm not sure what the circumstances around that were about. But all this week, our entire political class in the US is shouting about Cuba's repression. Did these people have anything to say when dozens of people were killed in Colombia and disappeared and being tortured and being shot at by police forces that America arms? No. And again, in Haiti, I mean, you were in Haiti a few months ago to witness the protests there. Extreme repression against protesters, not a word from anybody because these are right-wing neoliberal governments. Honduras, same thing. Chile, same people are getting shot in the eye for protesting in Chile months back. I didn't hear, Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio say a word. I mean, we all know why. Right? It's not like,
and there's so many connections. I mean, Marco Rubio, who was during the Trump administration, one of the points of Trump administration policy on Haiti. So supporting these policies that are so destructive for the Haitian people, the president who's now assassinated, Jovenel Moise, who was supported, of course, by the Trump administration. Marco Rubio's there meeting with him. So, I mean, it's so transparent. It's all about tyranny. I mean, it reminds me, Rania, when we did the shows during the war on Gaza, and as soon as the war is over, Gaza just completely leveled. And then you have Ted Cruz, I think like the governor of Indiana, I mean, all these random Republicans, and they find, one partially destroyed building from a rocket, and they're like, oh my God, look at how terrible these Palestinians are. They've destroyed Israel. And it's like they've leveled Gaza, and here they are in this one room with a little bit of debris in it or whatever. I mean, okay, I'm exaggerating. But I mean, the point being, it's so outrageous, but it's so outrageous in general, but it's almost even more outrageous how obvious it is. I mean, it's not as if these are sleights of hand or difficult things to figure out or whatever it may be. I mean, it's just right there in front of your face. But the agreed upon fiction in the media is what allows it to move forward. Is that some countries are good, some countries are bad, some organizations are good, some organizations are bad, and that black hat, white hat kind of reality governs the coverage that it gets, no matter how hypocritical it may seem.
Exactly. And there's like a whole cast of people who, of course, fall for it. Some of whom, by the way, are in our comments section. I can't help it. Every once in a while I check. I know you're not supposed to read the comments, but I can't help myself. I'm always curious what our viewers are chatting about. And it looks like there's at least a few of, I'm assuming probably Cuban Americans in our comments section who don't seem to be able to get over the fact that Fidel Castro took their family's plantations and slaves away. That's the only way I can interpret their antagonism towards Cuba.
When people say, "Oh, this is so tyrannical," if they're for the Jim Crow segregation that existed before 1959. I mean, we could go on, and I don't want to be the one to go on and on since we have other people who are coming in here. But the level of just total hypocrisy and the complete wiping out of the context of the blockade, where no government of any sort would be able to do anything under these forms of conditions. And the idea that there are so many who just dismiss that as some sort of afterthought, I mean, it goes really beyond my beliefs. So there's a lot here. There's a lot we're going to be talking about here. Of course, we're going to be talking about Cuba. We're going to be skipping over to the United Kingdom and talking about racism there in the United Kingdom coming in the wake of the Euro 2020. We're going to be checking in on what's happening in South Africa, where there's been quite a bit of unrest. It's been the top of world headlines really for the past couple days, so we'll be looking in on that. And then also, we are very excited. Towards the end, we're going to be joined by our colleague, Monica Cruz on the picket line, and we're also going to be joined by a representative of the United Mine Workers who are on strike still in Alabama, Warrior Met Coal. So there's a lot there. So before we jump into it, this is a great time for you to hit that share button so whoever is following you can follow us. And if you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and also hit the bell so that you can get the alerts. And as I said earlier, you can go to patreon.com/breakthroughnews if you want to continue to keep this fantastic network and all the great work we have going. But on that note,
I want to say, wait, Eugene, one last thing.
Yes.
Before we get to our guests that you're going to introduce in a moment, I just want to also add to your little rant there that if you also want to just throw in money in the super chat, which we always welcome, we will read your comments on air or try to get to all of them, that is. But go ahead, Eugene. Let's get to our guests.
Yes. Okay, well, we're getting sorry, no. It's all good. We've got one of our guests on. We got another guest coming soon. Gail Walker, who is the executive director of IFCO Pastors for Peace. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Freedom Side.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's a wonderful conversation I've been listening to, and important information that you're sharing. But grateful to be here.
No, we're very grateful for you to joining us. And, Gail, you were just recently in Cuba, and maybe give us some context of the impact of the blockade, because I think that's really the important thing that so many people, at least here in the United States, don't hear about in terms of the material situation in Cuba.
Yeah, thank you. It was the first time I'd been in Cuba in over a year and a half. Normally we go down quite often. We organize delegations and an annual caravan. We also facilitate the opportunity for young people to study medicine in Cuba. Another thing that you never hear about, this wonderful gift under full scholarship, with the only understanding being that they'll come back and serve in underserved communities here in the United States. So that's a whole nother show and a whole nother conversation. But I go down quite often, hadn't been down in more than a year and a half. And it was really heartbreaking to see a lot of what we witnessed. There are a lot of difficulties that our Cuban friends and family are enduring right now. Long lines, waiting to get into stores, often getting into stores, and many of the goods that were on the shelves are not there. There's a lot of like I said, difficulty that the people are facing. But I think that, a big part of that, not I think, I know, is very much related to U.S. Policy, U.S. foreign policy, specifically the 62-year-old blockade. But in terms of, real on the ground impact, it's tragic. It's you've got a lack of medicines. I mean, we brought suitcases and suitcases full of medicines. I'm talking about over-the-counter supplies, aspirins, antibiotics. We know that the suitcases we brought can't in any way supply all of Cuba's needs, and that wasn't the intent. But it was, let's do what we can to bring with us, some help. Gone in minutes. People were, just, hungering for any of these kind of supplies because there simply are none. I tell the story of a doctor, a friend of ours, who's a surgeon, who said, we can't perform surgery right now because we don't have the, for my patients, I don't have the antibiotics or the pain relievers to prescribe. So it's really disheartening. It's difficult for folk on the ground on a real level, but we really have to look at the sources of the challenges that people are facing, and so much is that it really lays at the feet of U.S. Foreign policy in Cuba.
Well, I'm so glad that you laid this out, and I also just want to give a quick shout out to Leah Boggs, who made a donation there in the chat and just said thank you. Well, thank you, Leah, for watching. And Gail, I mean, IFCO and Pastors, you all have been taking just many different things for so many years there to Cuba, and I don't know how do you make these kind of comparisons, but I mean, it feels like there's almost no country on earth where there's such difficulty performing even the most basic types of trade and economic intercourse around the world.
Oh, so true. That's absolutely so true. The world, right, has been grappling with this pandemic, no doubt. It's been a very difficult time for many nations in the world. But imagine being really the only country in the world that is trying to handle the pandemic, provide support for its people, while the U.S. government has been imposing a draconian, the list of adjectives, right? Illegal, immoral, unjust blockade against this tiny, small island nation, making it difficult for Cuba to be able to trade, making it difficult for it to be able to survive. There's no doubt that the challenges that Cuba has been forced to endure are contributing to a very difficult situation. You've got the blockade, coupled with the lack of tourism, the lack of people that are actually bringing hard currency into the country, which is down as a result of the blockade, but also as a result of the pandemic, and then of course the pandemic. It's a very difficult situation, and there are some bad agents. They're bad. There are some haters in the crowd. There's no doubt that there are people that are getting into some of those stores, hoarding some of those materials, and making it even a bad situation even worse. And the fact that there are entities within the United States that are helping to fan those flames. USAID, which is offering up to $500,000 to individuals and organizations that are willing to, quote, bring democracy to Cuba. There's a lot of there's so many different things at play, I think, on the ground, and it's a perfect storm for unrest and just difficulty for the Cuban people. I just want to also say, when you see a president walk into a crowd, I mean, this is not the sign of a country that is that's on the brink. This is not the sign of a government that is not in touch with its people. So you've got President Miguel Diaz-Canel and his ministers that are in the streets talking to people,
Right.
really listening, hearing the frustration, but also calling for to be a sane policy toward Cuba and understanding of what is truly going on. So it's I think that was really important and heartening to see. And I think that what Cuba needs now more than ever is for its friends and for the global community to really be able to look and see with a critical eye what's going on in the country, and to understand that there are so many levels of challenges that Cuba has been forced to endure and is grappling with, which is helping to lead to this really terrible situation for the people.
Mm-hmm. And I
So,
yeah, go ahead, Ronnie. Sorry.
Well, I just wanted to remind our listeners and viewers that to what Gail's saying is that under the Trump administration, as the pandemic was starting, Trump added over 200 new sanctions on Cuba, on top of what we already were doing to Cuba. And Biden has come into office and he has maintained those new sanctions on Cuba, despite the fact that we're in the middle of a pandemic. And he literally, with a pen, all he has to do is sign a piece of paper and he can get rid of those sanctions. And he has not done that for one reason and one reason only, and that is the Democratic Party's obsession with courting Cuban exiles in Florida for the sake of winning Florida, which they're not going to do anymore because they'll never outright wing the right wing in America or the Republicans in America. But the point is to say that this is a political game, and it's really duplicitous what's taking place here, because all of the suffering that Gail, that you just described, is a direct result of this blockade. And it's not just on Cuba. I mean, I feel like the Cuba model, because Americans are so war weary after Afghanistan, after Iraq, the Cuba blockade model is America's primary form of warfare now. They're doing it to Iran. They're doing it to Syria. They're starting to do it to Lebanon. They're doing it to Venezuela. And just hearing you speak about medicines, having people going to Cuba and bringing medication with them and bringing money with them is exactly what all my relatives who are coming to Lebanon and Syria are doing. They're having to fill their suitcases with medications because people can't access them anymore. And I just want to point out to what you were saying, one thing that Trump did do at the start of the pandemic is he restricted the dollar amount for remittances. Cuba is a country that, like a lot of developing countries, is very dependent on remittances from people living outside to send money back to their families. It's a part of the economy. And that was restricted to, I believe, $1,000 every quarter somebody could send, which is very little. So That has starved the country of hard currency as well. I mean, it's just so outrageous what you're describing. And I'm curious, when you were mentioning some, saboteur elements, when you're on the ground in Cuba, like in America, it's depicted as this repressive hellhole where people can't speak out. Are people able to have conversations and debate in Cuba? Can you kind of put that issue to rest? I imagine they are, from what I hear. They're able to have conversations about these things quite openly.
Yes, sure. No, that is so often a part of the blatant misinformation campaign, right? That there are there's the inability for people to speak their minds. You're going to hear different things, perhaps from different people. I can tell you, my 30 years of having traveled back and forth to Cuba, I've spoken to Cubans who may have a different point of view or a different, perspective on what the government might be doing, who have spoken freely to me. And I've not heard any cases of those people being, imprisoned or in any way, punished for speaking their minds. That's been my experience. I think that the other reality is that, for example, we, the IFCO, Pastors for Peace, we're a faith-based organization, interreligious foundation for community organization. We've done this work in part to really reach out to some of our faith leaders and faith partners in Cuba. The claim that there is no religious freedom in Cuba is absolutely a lie. That's absolutely not true. There are people that worship. There are people that participate in Afro-Cuban religious ceremonies. So across the border, across the gamut, there are expressions of religious freedom. That's a big part of the blatant misinformation campaign, and why we do the work that we do, bringing people there to see and experience the reality for themselves. The other thing that you mentioned so rightfully is that Trump imposed so many restrictions, but Biden, despite the fact that, while he was running for president, said he was going to do all kinds of wonderful things for the Cuban people, and hasn't done one thing, hasn't changed anything, has not reversed any of those 243 measures that were implemented by the Biden administration. And the point of remittances is so critically correct. And not just in Cuba, as you mentioned, in various countries, across the globe. But in 2019, $1.5 billion was sent in remittances to Cuba.
Wow.
That's a huge amount of money, and that's gone, and that's not been repaired or changed under the Biden administration. And for Biden to stand up and say, I stand with the Cuban people. If you stand with the Cuban people, then lift the blockade. At a minimum, do what Obama did in easing, because Obama didn't undo the blockade, but he eased some of the restrictions. At a minimum, that is certainly something that Biden can do. So there are so many levels of hypocrisy that are at play, and just indicative of the really the duplicitous nature of U.S. foreign policy as it relates to Cuba, and not just Cuba, as you mentioned, so many other nations in the world. A big part of what's happening with the attack on Cuba is Cuba's steadfast support for Palestine, for Venezuela, for Nicaragua, for Colombia. It's collective punishment. And that's been the mantra, I think, since the beginning of Cuba's triumph of its revolution in 1959. How dare this nation of Black and brown, people say, we've got our own system, we've got our own way of doing things, and embracing that and holding on to that. And it's earned them the wrath of the U.S. government for too many years. So
Well, you make such a good point
it's an ongoing situation.
No, well, you make such a good point there. No, please. About what Biden said, and I think that President Diaz-Canel made the same point. Lift the blockade and see what happens. I mean, if they're as terrible as you say they are, then that right there would completely expose them. And we always hear this from the United States. We hear it from, probably some of the people in the comments right now. I don't have YouTube up. Oh, well, that's just an excuse, and it's this, that, and the third. Well, then end it. Then prove all of us wrong that the blockade doesn't do anything at all. And I think the fact that they don't says really ultimately everything about them. But sorry, Rania, I think I cut you off there.
Well, I was just going to say, the numbers don't lie. All you have to do is look at the number of child mortality, hunger, literacy rates, pre-revolution and post-revolution, the access to healthcare, access to education. These things changed dramatically for the better in Cuba. And that is another reason why Cuba has been punished for the last 60 years. Because not only did Cubans themselves free themselves from U.S. empire, U.S. imperialism, U.S. capital, right? Not only did they free themselves essentially from slavery, they also implemented a system of socialism that worked for the masses of people for the better and demonstrated an alternative for the region that could help the majority of people. And that's why there had to be a blockade imposed. A blockade needed to be imposed to show socialism doesn't work. And what's amazing is the resiliency of the Cuban system. Obviously, we talk a lot about the suffering. There is a lot of suffering as a result of the blockade. But I'm also very impressed with the number of people who came out in the street to show the support show their support for the revolution, and way larger protests than we saw from even the protesters in Miami, the Cuban exiles who are still angry that their plantations and factories and land were redistributed and taken away from them, that they lost all their slaves and they want their slaves back. So now they're living in Miami waiting to get their slaves back. That's essentially what those people are angry about. And that's what I think Cuba represents for the developing world, which is such a threat to America, is it represents an alternative system of independence and sovereignty that has managed to adapt itself over and over collectively with a democratic process attached to it for the last 60 years in order not just to survive the US blockade, but to thrive. I mean, as all these shortages are happening, Cuba's still sending doctors around the world. They still have the world's, I think, highest per capita rate of doctors to people in their country. It's incredible. The number of hospitals, the number of doctors. I mean, America, what does America send around the world? America sends its military around the world to bomb countries. Right. Whereas Cuba's sending medical personnel around the world, and America calls that propagandistic and says that the doctors are slaves because apparently Cuban doctors who go and help other countries.
I think we have Gloria La Riva with us, who is actually on her way to Latin America right now. I appreciate her joining us en route. Gloria La Riva, the coordinator of the Cuba-Venezuela Solidarity Committee, also was just recently in Cuba. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Freedom Side.
Thank you for having me. Good to see you all. Hi, Gail. Hi, Rania.
Hi there. Hi, Gloria.
Hello.
I've actually got well, we're not going to do it yet. I've got a little treat later on. But Gloria, one of the things that Rania was just mentioning, I don't know if you were able to hear her, was the number of people who have come out into the street in support of the revolution, which of course has not been shown here in the mainstream media. But I think that's really an important element of everything that we are seeing right now, is that we're only being shown one side, but that the support for the revolution is certainly there, and it's certainly strong, at least from what I can see.
Yes, I think it's important to have a perspective about Cuban society. When you have millions march literally on May Day, every May Day, except for the pandemic time, people who joyously celebrate being workers. And when you have people in the streets protesting any given US policy that affects them, versus what I would say a number of hundreds, maybe 1,000 people that were demonstrating the other day upon a coordinated action that was obviously planned for months with a very intended objective to create chaos, violence, and to portray Cuba as ungovernable. And therefore, I think that not only that, but the message that the right wing was conveying was that they're suffering. Well, 11 million people have been going through this crisis of the pandemic, even though it was well managed. And unfortunately, in the last month has, grown very greatly, the numbers of COVID cases. But before that, Cuba was directing everything toward treating everybody, not only who's a patient who is ill, but people who are suspected of being positive, who've been in contact with people who've resulted positive. So all that energy is going toward that. And so I think that the US has, and the other European media and right-wing Latin American media, has been focused over and over on this minuscule number of people. And right now, the pictures you're showing are the masses who came out. The other thing is that the right wing had the advantage by springing this on people on a Sunday afternoon, or Sunday morning, actually. They sprung it, and so they had the advantage of initiative. And now people are showing, you're not going to bring our country down with this kind of operation.
Well, you raise a really important point there, Gloria, in terms of when you said 11 million people have been affected. I mean, I think that in and of itself is an important thing because, as we all know, there are many countries. We look at, say, a country like Haiti or whatever, where people are doing without, but if you're rich, you can get whatever you want. And it seems like an important statement that whatever exists in Cuba, whether it be good or bad, there's a level of equality there in terms of the experience people have, which seems totally unique, really, certainly in the region, but in many ways in the world.
Yes, and as a matter of fact, in the months before things were getting more difficult with COVID, on January 1st, the country initiated a whole new series of economic measures that, for one thing, raised considerably the wages of all state workers, who have been the ones who sacrificed the most in these last years. The private sector, people have been able to do well until the pandemic. The pandemic has affected everyone economically, but the state workers, the doctors, the nurses, the teachers, the administrative workers in all the offices, so many, I mean, literally hundreds of thousands of people, they've had very low wages, including the media workers, reporters, all the Cuban media. And in recognition of their sacrifice and staying in those jobs instead of moving to tourism or other things that can gain more income, but to provide the things that people need, education, healthcare, their salaries were boosted considerably. And that's the effect of a planned economy that Cuba has. I was speaking lately about the fact that one of the big problems for Cuba in this blockade is that their currency is not convertible on the world market. So they have to have dollars and euros, mainly through sales of some of their exports, but mainly tourism, or their doctors who serve abroad. The wealthier countries like Italy and others who have needed them badly in Latin America, the ones who have more money, they pay for the Cubans to provide the services for COVID or other illnesses. And then the doctors keep 25% of that money, which is a very good income for them. And the rest of the money, 75%, is spent on Cuba's healthcare for medicine and other things for the people. So the U.S. has been targeting the doctors. You know, they've been demonizing them, saying they're slaves, they're military. The U.S. government says that the 23,000 doctors in Venezuela are intelligence officials. Are you kidding me? But what they've done is to demonize the doctors. And Bolsonaro, this dictator in Brazil, he expelled all the Cuban doctors. And Cuba lost hundreds of millions of dollars in income for their health care. That's why the doctors are being demonized, because their world-renowned healthcare system is a model, is an example.
I think that's such a good point. You know, many years ago, early 2000s, I once got very sick in Venezuela and was treated by Cuban doctors. So if they're not doctors, they're the best non-doctors I've ever been treated by. I'll tell you that. I don't know, Juan in the booth, if we have the photo ready that I was able to obtain this morning, but I think it's. You know, it certainly speaks to the testament of the guests and the work that they've done over the years, but also the criminalization. So there's Gail Walker, Gloria La Riva. I mean, this is an amazing story. I actually got this photo. I did not tell Gloria I was going to use this today, but I did get it from her. And it was during I know, Gail, I told you I had a treat. I had a surprise. Gloria, tell the story of that photo that Gail, I also want to hear from you. It's an amazing story.
Well, it was the summer of 1993 when Cuba went through the hardest time. You know, the Soviet Union had collapsed. They were on their own. They were trying to make do. And Gail's father, Reverend Lucius Walker, was heading up the second caravan to Cuba, which was a challenge to U.S. policy. They wouldn't accept license. And we were both with about 100 people on that caravan. We get to the border of Laredo, Texas. We spent all day in 107-degree heat, transporting the goods by hand across the border into Mexico. It would be boarded onto a ship, and then we would fly to Cuba. But at the end of the day, the U.S. government seized a little yellow school bus that was headed to Cuba from us. And what ended up being was 7 people went on a hunger strike for 23 days on that bus, including Reverend Lucius Walker. And myself, Gail, and others in the caravan, we flew to Cuba the day that the hunger strike began because the Cubans wanted us there. And we came back after a week, or 10 days. There was no media coverage in the U.S. about it, so we decided we would go to Houston, Texas, and get arrested and make a scene. So we leafleted all day, and then we sat in front of the federal building to say, lift the blockade, end this genocide. and we were arrested. And we thought we'd get out that night, but we were held for 3 days. We were held for 3 days,
Wow.
and you got to take that story over, Gail.
Yeah, it was quite an experience. Yes, we did expect that we would go. I mean, I'm used to doing CD, civil disobedience in New York. We have an action, and then we get what we call a desk appearance ticket, and we come back and we go to court. They held us, as Gloria said, for 3 days and under terrible conditions. I mean, it was hot as hell outside, and the air conditioning was ratcheted all the way up. They were depriving us of sleep. They would just walking from one part of the jail to another part. They would use that as a pretext for saying, "Well, we've got to do a strip search," just trying to really break us down. Try to break down our spirit. It was quite an experience. I'd never seen anything like that. Experienced that in the U.S. of A. Good old
Freedom and democracy, allegedly.
Thank you, freedom and thank you in democracy. But quite an experience, and it was an honor to be arrested with my sister Gloria La Riva, who taught me so much. But we've been continuing, had been doing the work before that, but continue to really stand up and support Cuba. The horrible experience we had was certainly horrific, but nothing in comparison to the 6 decades plus of embargo, of blockade, of unilateral, international pointed blockade against the Cuban people. So it's important that we continue to do this work. That's a great picture, though. I got to get a copy.
Yeah, Gail, I walked into the office last night, and some of our people were looking over the photos. It was right on the table. I said, "Oh my God, we just talked about that." But that the 1990s was not only an enormous test for the Cuban people, but their biotechnology was being developed right at that moment. And the tourism was starting to grow. So Cuba rose out of these dire circumstances with their creativity, with the coordination of all the scientists and the doctors. They had, free of the profit motive. That's why they've been able to succeed, because their motive for healthcare is not the profit. Their motive for medicine and vaccines isn't, the stock market. Whenever a medicine goes on the market here, the immediate news is the stock market and what value it has. And there they have the value is a human life. There's a very famous billboard about the Calixto Garcia Hospital, which is a teaching hospital of the University of Havana. It's a picture of Che Guevara, and it says, "The life of a human being is worth more than all the wealth in the world."
Yeah. And I think it speaks to why Cuba has been able to, even with the foot of the blockade, the foot of the U.S. government on its neck, been able to make the commitment to come up with 5 vaccine candidates. It's a tremendous, testament to Cuba's commitment to its people, to healthcare, not only for the people of Cuba, but the people of the region. Many of these other companies, Pfizer and Moderna and Johnson & Johnson, I mean, they're all looking at, the dollar bill. Cuba has committed to sharing their vaccines with the region, with foreign nations. And it's just an example of what Cuba has done and will continue to do. And it relates to what I was explaining earlier, their commitment to ELAM, the Latin America School of Medicine, teaching, providing an opportunity for young people from various countries, including the U.S., the very country that's been blockading it, an opportunity to bring young physicians to practice where they're needed most in underserved communities in their countries. So it's a
really
wonderful example.
It is. I saw the health minister of
I'd like to
Argentina
say-
give a press conference speaking of that, because, she came back and they said, "Oh, well, what did you see there?" And she said, "We examined all of the vaccine from the testing to the production, and it's top notch. I mean, this is, and of course, you know, Argentina is, you know, looking to procure a number of these Cuban vaccines. And I thought, you know, that in and of itself is a testament. I mean, not that Argentina doesn't have a relatively progressive government, but, you know, as one of the wealthier countries in Latin America, one that isn't as demonized, for the health minister of a country like that to make this comment, I think is so important. But Gloria, go ahead.
Oh, no, I want to say that I was in Cuba at the same time Gail was. In fact, we were in the same house. And I have to tell you, day and night, she and her colleague in Pastors for Peace, they were working so intensely with the US medical students to help them, because they've been a year and a half without their families, and they came to provide sustenance and, you know, guidance. And I just have to say it's an extremely important project. And all those doctors who come back to the US, it's a lifelong commitment to help the people, the poorest people who have poor health access, but who Cuba has reached out to the United States as a true act of solidarity. So I really salute Gail and what she's been doing all these years.
Thank you, Gloria. Thank you.
Well, one important piece of news that I just was sent that I want to speak, because when we're talking about the work of solidarity activists, I think it's important. And it seems, we don't know this, but the White House may have been affected by the outcry. There's breaking news coming from Reuters that the Biden administration may ease the ban on remittances as part of a review here. Someone just sent me this. I haven't read this fully, but it does speak to the fact that people speaking out, Gail, can work. It does make a difference. It's not just crying into the wilderness.
Yeah, no, that's so heartening. I hadn't heard that news, but thank you. And what better place for it to break than in breaking news here, breaking through the news.
Breakthrough news, some might say.
That's right.
Sorry, I had to say it. Go ahead.
I admit I have a hard time remembering too. I love it though.
Right. But you know, there's a young man by the name of Carlos Lasso, who's a Cuban American, but anyway, he's literally walking from Florida to Washington, D.C. to highlight the injustice of the blockade, to talk about the fact that, you know, families are being denied the remittances and the support. And I think so much of this, the credit, you know, goes to him as well, not just to him, but those who have put themselves on the line, and to say, you know, these are our families that we're talking about. I'm not terribly surprised that Biden has done. I think it's great and it's wonderful. Will be a benefit to the people who will receive those remittances. But we need more. We need more, and Cuba needs more. But this is good news. This is certainly good news.
It's excellent news. However, I mean, it's important to understand what Cuba's up against, because you have these weaponized immigrants that I've mentioned a few times throughout this episode. Some of them are commenting in the chat and trying to cause problems. Again, still very angry that Fidel took their plantations and their families' plantations. But there's a large, this Cuban exile community in Miami, including one of whom is the mayor of Miami. And they're having this crazy debate trying to use these protests from Sunday as a pretext for airstrikes. We have the mayor of Miami went on Fox News and called for airstrikes on Cuba. Can we play that clip? Because it's so shocking. I want people to see it in case they didn't.
A repressive government and a cruel U.S. embargo. They deserve policies that empower them and help them improve their lives. Do you think that President Biden, looking at this situation, will lift that embargo? And do you think that's what he should do?
No, I don't think the embargo is cruel at all. And I think that the Cuban people are not asking for a lifting of the embargo. They're going out in the streets every single day talking about the failure of the communist regime to provide for its people. And I don't understand why that's so difficult for people to understand. It has failed for 6 decades. And what should be being contemplated right now is a coalition a potential military action in Cuba, similar to what has happened in both administrations, in both Republican and Democrat administrations. In Republican with Bush in Panama, they deposed Noriega, and that country had peaceful democracy for decades. And you had interventions by Democratic presidents, taking out Osama bin Laden in Pakistan. It's a sovereign country where they took out a terrorist that probably saved thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of lives, and President Clinton in Kosovo intervening in a humanitarian issue with airstrikes. So there have been many, many opportunities in the history.
Are you suggesting airstrikes in Cuba?
What I'm suggesting is that option is one that has to be explored and cannot be just simply discarded as an option that is not on the table. And there's a variety of ways the military can do it, but that's something that needs to be discussed and needs to be looked at as a potential option, in addition to a variety of other options that can be discussed.
Yeah. I mean, that is insane. He just called for bombing Cuba to help Cubans. I'd love to get your reaction. Maybe let's start with you, Gloria, and then we can see what Gail has to say.
He's playing to the billion-dollar industry of Miami that gives money, creates politicians, sends them to Congress, the Senate, the House. If you can be as, violent toward Cuba as you can be, to say that the blockade is fine, it's criminal what he's saying. But that's Miami. Miami's really like another country. And you wouldn't find that kind of attitude anywhere in the country. But I have to say that it's great to hear this possible lifting of the ban on the remittances. And there are people in Cuba who have family in the US. In 2019, they gave $1.5 billion to their families, but a lot of people don't have family. But there will be a possibility, friends, to be able to give money to a bank account in Cuba for medical aid and for assistance to the Cuban people in general. That will be, things like that. You can give, if you don't have family there, you will be able to donate in other ways. Keep in touch with the Answer Coalition and keep in touch with, Pastors for Peace, and we will be able to direct people on how to help, because we'll need that. But I saw that yesterday from Suarez, the mayor, and he's one, the terrorist, Osada Carriles, who murdered 73 people by directing bombs on a Cuban airliner in 1976. Do you know that when he ended up in Miami and was not deported as he should have been to Venezuela, where he carried out that crime, that both Bush and Obama refused to extradite him for that crime? And he was given the keys to some of the towns in Miami, and he headed up a march in Miami calling for bombing Cuba. That's Miami. It's
Jesus.
And then you have
Miami also. Yeah.
Sorry.
No, I was just gonna say Miami is it's really functioned, or Florida in general has really functioned as this safe haven that the U.S. has created for far right fascistic terrorists. Honestly, I don't know what else to call them. People who've shot down, been trained by the CIA, and then shot down Cuban airliners, have blown up hotels in Cuba to try to destroy the tourism industry. We even see now, not to change the subject completely, but just that, we saw today that some of these Colombians who participated in the assassination in Haiti of Jovenel Moïse were actually trained by the U.S. as well, and in Florida. So anyways, just to speak to what you're saying, this is Miami, right? It's not everybody there, of course, not every Cuban there is right wing, but it is this place where all these exiles have gathered and have been weaponized by the U.S. to try to destroy their home countries.
But it's very important to say this. They're not the tail that wags the dog. It's U.S. policy. It's the Pentagon. It's the corporate heads in Wall Street. It's, the White House. They're the ones who direct U.S. policy. The right wing in Miami is their pretext. It's their voice to be able to do what they want to do. And it's not just Republicans, it's Democrats too. Forgive me, but I'm going to have to get off. I have to go check in.
Yeah.
Take that flight. I'm going to Nicaragua,
of course.
which is soon to be another target.
That's right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Gloria.
Safe
Gail,
travels.
why don't you get in here? Certainly give us your thoughts about that clip and anything else. Oh, Gail, you might be muted.
Oh,
now we got you.
There you go. No, you're not. We got you. Yeah.
Okay, great. Just so you all made such, I think, really tremendously salient points that there's a history of that kind of rhetoric, of that kind of vicious, vile sort of approach when it comes to Cuba. You all mentioned the shooting down of planes, the fencing team that was, of young people that were just, wiped off the planet, the assassination, not only attempts but successful assassinations. I mean, throughout the history of Cuba's revolutionary project, there have been all of these attacks, and so this is very much part and parcel with that kind of a mentality. But yeah, how is it that you think helping Cuba is going to be, achieved through bombing of the country? It's just it makes no sense. It's ludicrous, and I just want to reiterate that what was being said earlier by my sister Gloria is that many of us are working at collecting money so that we can send some much needed supplies, medical supplies to Cuba. This is not, I think it's really important to make sure that we say that this is not the solution to Cuba's problems. The solution is lifting the blockade. And that's something that the Trump administration that I'm sorry, slip of the tongue there. The Biden administration, or maybe not, could easily do, Freudian slip, could do and should do. But that's what really Cuba is in need of. But in the meanwhile, its friends in the international community, as Gloria was mentioning, the Answer Coalition, but certainly IFCO Pastors for Peace, we're in the process of raising funds so that we can get as much medical supplies on the ground to help those that are really suffering at this very moment, while we continue to push and speak out and act out against this this draconian blockade policy, and appreciate having platforms like this to be able to talk about the reality on the ground in Cuba.
No, well, absolutely. And Gail, we really appreciate you being willing to join us, giving us this opportunity. We'll obviously continue to talk and tell people about the work that you all are doing at IFCO. And I'll say before you go, Elizabeth Marino just made a donation, the super chat, with the note, "Long live Pastors for Peace and people-to-people foreign policy." So the fans and all of us here at Breakthrough News, really grateful to you for joining us.
Thank you so much. And thank you for all you're doing and the important information you're putting out, countering some of the mess that we hear on, certainly not just sort of mainstream media. I mean, I'm talking about the MSNBCs, the more quote unquote progressive, allegedly media outlets that are also helping to fan the flame. So it's important to have a platform for these our voices. We appreciate all you do.
Right on. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, Rania, there's so much here. So you've got a few more super chats. Martine Hernandez saying, "Hands off Cuba. Good work, y'all. Thank you." Mr. 13FNG, one of our frequent super chat donators. Shout out to you. Thanks for joining us again here, talking about this is how the U.S. starts dirty wars and regime changes. And there's a lot of recent history of the U.S. doing that. Libya, Syria, Venezuela, etc. People stop drinking the Kool-Aid, and I hear you, Mr. 13FNG. Certainly, it's tricky, and that's why we are here to help break down a lot of this. I mean, I don't want to make too hard of a pivot here, Rania. I just almost want to take a second. I mean, that was great information.
That was incredible.
Just, an unbelievable, the level of disinformation that exists on the issue of Cuba.
Yeah, it feels like we're shouting into a sea of disinformation. We're like, hey, we know what's actually happening. It's like so hard to get through. And, for outlets like ours who are telling the truth about Cuba, we're flooded with incessant trolls. Again, I can't stop looking at the comments, and I appreciate all those who are commenting in the chat and pushing back against those trolls. But it's like an army of them. And it's not just on YouTube. It's also on Instagram. They mass reported a few of the videos that our colleague Kay Pritzker had put together about Cuba
including
this past
a video
week,
about
and got
bots and suspicious accounts.
So yeah, which is funny. But one of the videos about syringes got taken down because it was mass reported by these people. They are trying to suppress the truth about Cuba the fact that the US blockade is preventing Cuba from accessing syringes so that it can actually give people one of the vaccines, 5 of vaccines, a couple of which are very effective. One of which is so effective it's like 92%, which is almost competitive with Pfizer and Moderna.
It is,
but they're not able to actually. It is competitive. That's a very competitive effectivity rate. I believe it's higher than Johnson & Johnson and a couple of the other AstraZeneca, all those vaccines. But the point is they're not even able to give them out to people in mass because they don't have enough syringes because of the blockade. So, I mean, it's just, I'm glad that we have this platform, and I'm going to segue real quick just to remind people that that's why you need to support outlets like Breakthrough News. And you can support us by becoming a patron at patreon.com/breakthrough news or throwing money in the super chat. And as you've seen throughout, if you do, we will read your comment on air, assuming
and we've got a
it's
couple
an appropriate
here,
one.
Right, including it's appropriate.
Yeah.
That is key, Rania. Thank you for that. Tafari, thank you. Made a donation, sending love and strength. BT News holding it down, lifting us up at the same time. Free the land. And also, Zaid Ahmed, also, shout out to you, thank you, saying, funny how Americans were saying the Cuban government is unjustly imprisoning Cubans when the only ones doing it on the island are the Americans with Guantanamo Bay, which still open, by the way. Notable issue. I mean, a number of people in Guantanamo Bay are actually cleared for release, but they will not, in fact, release them. So we can talk about that on another issue. We want to segue here now to a row, as they say, I believe, in the United Kingdom, coming on the wake of Euro 2020. Now, for those of you who don't watch sports, you're like, what? This is 2021. It was postponed last year, so it took place this year. They didn't change the name, so that's what you know, Euro 2020. But for those who did see this, the final, England versus Italy, it went to PKs, penalty kicks. England was unable to prevail, and quite a bit has happened in relationship to that. Let me not editorialize too much. Want to bring on the journalist Sapphire McIntosh to help us break all this down. Sapphire, thank you so much for being with us here on the show.
Hello, good evening.
So there are some, and even perhaps some of the people on our team who are not as avid of football watchers as myself. So if you could, Sapphire, just real quick, explain what took place there in the PKs and why it has become a major controversy there in the UK.
Sure. Just to let you know, there's a bit of a lag, so it might take a while. Am I okay for you guys?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Good. Just to let you know, guys, I'm from the north of England, so I will try and make sure that you can understand me. But basically, the Euros 2020 is it's a soccer tournament, football tournament that happens between nations from Europe. So you've got the likes of France, Belgium, Ukraine, England, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, all participating in a summer soccer tournament. And basically, the winner was to be, the winning game was to be played at Wembley. So on Sunday, England got into the Euro finals, the first final we've been in for over 50 years. And we lost on penalty kicks against Italy, who were the favourites. England did well. Nobody expected us to do this well. This is the most successful football male team that we've had for decades. And it was filled with youngsters, black, mixed race, white, young men who were millionaires. And unfortunately, the last 3 penalty kicks were missed. And out of the last 3 penalty kicks, 2 were black and 1 was mixed race. And this caused people online to target these players and racially abuse them with gorilla emojis, banana skins, and some people were making videos using the N-word, etc.
I mean, really just, disgusting on so many levels. And I mean, this seems like it was really, it wasn't just necessarily even the PKs, because the team itself, including many of the players in question, had been speaking out against racism, not just in football, soccer, but, just in generally in society. They were taking a knee before the games. I mean, this has been a big undercurrent about this year's England team, it seems, the fight against racism.
Yes, so some would say that the England national team are a the best opposition to our government. Some would say that some of the players have more strength in terms of guiding our government than other politicians. Marcus Rashford, for example, who plays for Manchester United, he's from South Manchester. He's a black male. He was instrumental in the government changing their mind on giving out free school meals to children in need during the summer of COVID. So our government was going to stop supplementing poorer children to be fed free meals at their school during the summer holidays. Marcus Rashford was vocal about that because himself grew up in poverty. His mother was working 3 jobs. He used to eat cereal all the time and he struggled. Just like a lot of the English players have struggled. We've got working class millionaires. These are the strongest working class voices in England, I would say. These are the people that really speak to the nation more than politicians do, to be honest with you, because our politicians usually are privately educated. A lot of them are landlords. A lot of them haven't struggled. Whereas the English players, just like in America, basketball players, it's one of the ways that you can achieve social mobility. And with that, these people know what it's like to be normal or know what it's like to struggle. This is one of the only sports, really, which is dominated by people from working class poverty backgrounds.
Well, and people in the chat want to know what team I support. Ask them. Listen, I don't want to start another issue here in the comments. Let me ask you this, Sapphire. We'll come back around to my supporting. What has the response be? Because obviously there's been so much conversation I think people have heard about in terms of the racism, but what have we seen in response to this terrible abuse the players have been subjected to?
Oh, where do I start? So what you can see in the background is, so there was a mural painted of Marcus Rashford after he won the argument for free school meals to be given to poorer children. There was something created to celebrate Marcus Rashford. After he missed the penalty kick, people defaced it with racist slurs. The day after, people from the area have gone and put stickers up and banners up saying, "We love you, Marcus. You're a true hero. Thank you for feeding us. Black Lives Matter," and kneeling next to the memorial. Then we have politicians, Prince William, coming out and saying that they stand against these racists. However, in my point of view, I would say Prince William didn't say anything when Meghan Markle was getting racially abused. Boris Johnson has called black people pickaninnies. He's called Muslim women looking like letterboxes. Priti Patel, she said, we stand against racism, but at the start of the tournament, she said she didn't agree with English players taking the knee. As soon as we all started doing well, as soon as the England players started getting through each stage of the tournament, the politicians came out with the England shirts and they were celebrating them. Apparently, the English team were invited to number 10 to meet the Prime Minister. Apparently, that invitation's been declined.
I mean, that's certainly in and of itself a powerful moment. It reminds, it's what we've seen from some of the NBA players refusing to meet with Trump. I mean, it really does feel, well, let me ask you, does it feel like this is an inflection point of sorts in terms of the anti-racist struggle in the UK? Are you expecting this to sort of just die off or to kick off more discussion about it or what?
I don't have much hope. I'm afraid. I'm sorry. I don't. I don't have much hope. I haven't seen much change. And Kelechi, who is an awesome social commentator, she spoke about the fact that people are putting plasters over the problem on the Marcus Rashford memorial is just what we do. We cover it. We don't rip it open. Nobody wants to engage really in why our best player, Raheem Sterling, why is his surname Sterling? He was born in Jamaica. He moved to England when he was 10. He has the most British English surname ever, but nobody will know why his surname is Sterling. It's because the English colonized Jamaica and he got the surname of his slave traders. These kind of discussions are swept under the carpet, and these issues and these arguments, they're just surface level. But I really think if you want to really penetrate this problem, you need to scrape right down and start again. But I just think it's too heavy, and even the banana skin or the gorilla. Why do we use them for black players? Why is it the gorilla? Why is it the banana skin? All we do is say 10-match ban, lifetime match ban. Boris Johnson was trying to get social media giants to to ban these. What's a ban? You can grow a mustache and go back in the next year.
Right. Yeah, I mean, watch it on TV. I mean, it seems to change nothing. And no, I think you make a good point. I mean, it reminds me of when, people were taking down statues there, both in the UK and the United States, and people are just outraged that, people who have done, I mean, it's like these terrible crimes. People say, well, it was 200 years ago, as if it wasn't the worst crimes that continue to reverberate to today.
Yeah, exactly. So people say, oh, well, it was 400 years ago. Well, William Shakespeare, I can't remember when he died, but that was years ago. And we still learn about him at school.
Right.
We learn about the Industrial Revolution, which was, in the 1800s. So why can't we learn about something that fueled the Industrial Revolution? I just feel like, nobody, it's too painful. Nobody really wants to go there. Tyrone Mings said to Priti Patel, you cannot come out and condemn racists when at the start of the tournament, you were saying that we were doing jester politics. And now when you fuel the thing that was happening and it happens, you can't come out then and denounce it. So Priti Patel is our Home Secretary. She's Asian. However, some of her thoughts, beliefs, sometimes skew towards extreme far right.
Mm-hmm. Well, and one thing I actually do want to raise, since we've brought up the Home Secretary here, is the issue of policing. I mean, I think many people probably have some knowledge here in the United States that what we saw last year in 2020 here also echoed over there in the UK. I mean, what kind of parallels are there, maybe for those who are watching in the United States, between some of these issues around racism, policing, prisons, and so on?
Oh, yeah, exactly the same. One thing I would say about America, how it differs to us, is that you guys were enslaved in that country, whereas our ancestors were enslaved in mostly in the Caribbean. So yeah, a lot of us are of Caribbean descent. So my grandparents from Jamaica and Barbados. So it's the slavery didn't happen here, whereas I think the slavery happened in America, and I think that is different. You have a larger Black population than us. I think, is yours 13%, 18%?
Yeah, about 13, 15%, 40 million people roughly.
Yeah, ours is like 3%. I think that's like maybe 2 million. Yeah, and a population, I think, of 60 million. And then Indians, Bangladeshi, they're a larger population. And then we have quite a large biracial population as well. However, with all that being said, I watched a clip yesterday, actually, on BBC Newsnight. Black people are 10 times more likely to be stopped and searched. I don't know the exact figures, but everything replicates pretty much, guys.
Yeah. Well, Sapphire, I know you've also been doing some work on a number of these questions. I know you've put out some work of your own. Where can people find your work and see more of what you have to say?
So you can go to YouTube and just type in SAFMAC, which is SAPHMC, or you can find me on Instagram, Sapphire_Macintosh.
Well, Sapphire, really appreciate you joining us, giving a little bit of your time. I hope everyone checks out your fantastic work. But thanks for being with us here on the Freedom Side. No worries. Thank you, guys. Take care. Right on. Bye. Well, Rania, I know that you're an athlete, but you weren't closely following Euro 2020, so I hope you learned something there.
I did. Thank you. I like how you had to take the jab at me for being a stereotype of a girl and
well, you're in better
not
shape
knowing
than I
anything
am, so
about
it is
sports.
what it is. I'm watching sports, you're actually working out. So some might say that you're getting the better part
Look
of
at that bicep.
That's
yeah.
big.
Sorry, I'll stop. I'm gonna start. We'll have a whole segment where I just flex my muscles.
Well, if people follow you on Instagram, they can see what you're doing. It's very impressive. We've actually already had one person comment on that today.
Oh, really? I feel it's true. We have. I feel leftists need to be strong, and pull-ups can be a life-saving thing to be able to do to pull yourself up. Especially like, what if you're ever hanging from a building? I don't know why you'd be hanging from a building. If there ever is some sort of like,
is that what you think about when you're when it starts to burn? You're just like, well, what if I'm ever hanging from a building? Like Mission Impossible 6.
I live in Lebanon. Okay. There was a port explosion last year, right? Things are collapsing around me. If I need to be able to pull myself up, it could save my life one day. That's how I see it. Also, if there ever is some sort of like, if there ever is some sort of war between the right and the left, we have to have people on the left who are strong. You got to have muscle. So there you go.
You know what? stay ready. You don't have to get ready. But I am in awe of you're doing way better than I am. I'm watching the sports. You actually can play a sport. I did. I don't know what I would look like now if I got out there. Probably be embarrassing. A couple other super chats here. I don't know if that's August 66, AUG 66. I don't know exactly what you're going through there with the AUG, but thank you so much for your donation. Rania is the best reporter in the English language. I agree.
I am. Thank you.
And also noting that English racism has increased hugely in recent years as media is owned by racist people. Well, that right there, Rania, that's a good parallel with the United States. And then also Danielle De Jesus. Thank you so much for your donation, by the way. And you also said thank you for your much appreciated information. Hands off Cuba. Thank you so much, Danielle. Really appreciate that. Go ahead, Rania.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I was, again, like, I can't help it but look at the chat. I can't help it. I just do it sometimes. And even as we moved on to talk about sports, there was still trolls in the chat talking about how Cuba and Venezuela are evil and poor because socialism and communism are bad.
Well,
I mean, these people just
to
don't quit.
lies.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. You gotta stay doing it. It's commitment. I have to appreciate the commitment if they're actually real people and not like bots being controlled by some
a lot of that
PR firm somewhere. Yeah.
I would, and more is going to come out on that, and that's going to be a story we're going to have to follow because people. Well, we know, you see it. I mean, I just look at the people who follow me on a day in and day out basis, and you see so many of these bots. Well, we want to shift gears to the country of South Africa, and we are very, very honored to be joined here by Sabu Zakode, who is the founder, or one of the founders of the Shack Dwellers movement in South Africa. Sabu, thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, you're muted.
For having me.
There we go.
We got you here. Perfect. No, well, the pleasure is absolutely ours. So
yes, I am very delighted to be invited here.
No, well, we are so happy to have you. And I think, many people are seeing the images from South Africa. They're hearing many things about what is happening there, what motivated it. Some are hearing that it's related to Jacob Zuma and his arrest. Some are hearing that it's driven by xenophobia, others that it's driven by poverty. I mean, if you could put in context for us what we've seen over the past few days in South Africa.
Well, it is very disturbing, obviously, for all of us, what we are seeing here. But I think it's important to point out that for a very long time, our movement, the Shack Dwellers movement of South Africa, Abahlali, has been warning that the anger of the poor can go in many directions, and it takes different form for people to express the plight that they've been having for too long. So what we are seeing today is an explosion because we've always been sitting on the ticking time bomb, and it has come to a point that it has to explode. No human being, no community, no nation can live under the hunger and starvation with more than 43% of the population being unemployed and with more than 74.9% of the youth who are unemployed. Yes, there may have been the Jacob Zuma saga, the arrest of the former president of South Africa, Jacob Zuma. Well, there were few individuals, of course, who were in solidarity with him, who wouldn't let him be jailed. However, those are just few people within the ANC. It's the faction of the ruling party, the African National Congress, who have actually initiated this, but it has given a rise to an anger that has been sitting in the society for too long. So poverty is the main cause, because if people weren't frustrated as they were for too long, these individuals who may have initiated this would have been isolated and would have been apprehended as we speak.
One of the things that I saw, and I really appreciated the statement that you all made that I thought was very relevant to this, is when people have been standing up to many of the terrible social conditions, they've been criminalized, they've been attacked, and that, forms of protest, if you will, I hate to say more constructive because I don't want to denounce anyone, but how it's so difficult to raise your voice in a way that really is talking about transformative change in South Africa, and that makes these sorts of situations more likely. I was hoping you could speak to that to a degree.
Yes, it is really disturbing that the state has been very repressive, very violent. In fact, many of our poor communities have been taught violence by the state, who have always treated the poor and the marginalized with violence. So we've always been ruled with violence, and what that did was actually teaching the nation to react in violence way. And this is what we are confronted with when the state has militarized its cities, when private security guards have been militarized, and even our local politicians have used violence to rule. So this is the fruit of these violence that has, created a violent sort of nation. So our homes have constantly been vandalized with impunity, without the court orders, without following the legal procedures that are required, to have someone evicted. So all these accumulation of anger, with people who are landless, people who are homeless, people who are unemployed, people who have been affected by COVID-19 and who have been locked in their homes, because from time to time we are locked down, as you would understand, some of the regulation of the COVID-19. So all of these frustrations really have, exploded today. So people were really brave enough to actually ignore all the regulations that the COVID-19 government has brought in for COVID-19. People have made it clear that they'd rather be killed by COVID-19 pandemic rather than being killed by hunger and starvation, which for a very long time they've been really facing these sort of challenges.
I mean, it's amazing to reflect on, and one of the other factors I'm curious is, how did it feel to see the military brought into the street? I mean, as you point out, obviously the police are very militarized, but seeing the military brought out, the reserves called up, I mean, it seemed to recall some of the worst images from the darkest days of apartheid. I mean, I don't know if I'm right in making those kind of comparisons to see this kind of action.
Yes, no, absolutely. You are right. Not in a democratic country one would expect military to be working in our streets and in our communities. It's really frightening. I mean, last year during the level 5, level 4 of the national lockdown, we experienced a similar, militaries coming to our communities. A number of lives were lost, and this is what we would expect. Now, when you see military and the police so armed in this manner, it tells you that the leadership has completely failed, and it is a failed state. And this is what happens when the state has failed, then the military takes over. So right now, you hardly hear any politicians giving leadership and providing clean and clear leadership at this time. All they do is to send the military. And this is what they have always been about, failing to confront, failing to engage communities in a democratic and peaceful manner that is constructive, that is accommodative, that is participatory. So instead, they will send the police and the military. And this is what we see.
You all in the shack dwellers movement have, and we've talked a little bit about repression, have really, I think, and even just recently, but obviously over a long time, borne the brunt of a lot of this. I mean, people, trumped up charges of murder, the destruction of your encampments. I mean, talk a little bit about that if you could, because I think it's an important element in terms of the situation there.
Yes, the plight of the people and the anger has been accumulating because for a very long time, here we are dealing with the landless. Millions of people in South Africa remain landless in their country of birth. They remain homeless. I mean, we have more than 2,700 informal settlement in South Africa. And of course, more than 12 million people have to live in substandard housing conditions. Many of them are unemployed. Many of them go to bed without food. So in the midst of that, when people are trying to have shelter over their heads without really robbing anybody, without doing any crime, of course, people would occupy vacant and unused land to have a place they called home for their children. And what the state does, it's to vandalize and destroy those homes that people, those houses that people call home. So what do you do in a situation where the state cannot provide an alternative accommodation, where the state cannot assist in making sure that everyone is housed? And then what they do is to vandalize the legal efforts that you have for yourself. You know, this has been happening for a very long time. You know, some of the communities would have their home destroyed more than 30 times. Wow. Even if you go to court, you know, to have your rights protected. And still, some of the municipalities like eThekwini in Durban, the city would act in full violation of the court orders with impunity. So all of these have really breeds anger on poor people. And but what we are seeing now, I must say, which we do not, of course, condone, we do condemn any acts of violence or looting. But what we're seeing now is that really people have a reason to go out to find food. And they've been very brave to say, we don't care whether there is COVID-19 or what. All we cannot afford is to be killed by hunger and starvation. So in the midst of COVID-19, so we have this problem. Now, as I'm speaking to you, there's been a settlement that was swept into ashes by fire. So there are shack fires because it's winter right now. So in the middle of this crisis, you have the entire settlement being burnt to ashes. How do you create a society? How do you expect peace and sustainable society when the economy is so exclusive and marginalizing very impoverished people who are really working hard to build our cities and to build our nations?
You know, I wonder what role or where you place it in terms of everything we see in the social crisis of youth unemployment, which is some of the highest in the world there in South Africa, and young people in the situation that they're facing.
It is very disappointing, obviously, when young people have no future, have no hopes. And I can tell you, it's young people that are actually on the streets as we speak. They have so much energy and wisdom. So when you provide them with no alternatives, with no hopes for a better future, even the graduates, people who have been to universities, suddenly they have no jobs. So what do you make out of those people? Obviously, you are really building, a village of criminals where young people have no hopes. So this is what we are confronted with. So this is really a dangerous situation when mostly young people remain unemployed.
You know, one of the things that you mentioned is that, these are really the actions of a failed state. And I think for many people watching in the United States, especially who maybe know a little bit about the history of South Africa, the history, the legacy of the ANC obviously looms very large in the context of the struggle and solidarity with the struggle against apartheid there in South Africa. And I think some people wonder, how does this happen? How does this movement that many people know either from firsthand or history that was so heroic for so many years end up where we are now?
It's really disappointing. ANC, the African National Congress, was one of the hope and of many South Africans as a liberation movement. But I must say that that all the hopes and the aspirations that the people of South Africa had on the ANC has all gone. The ANC is no longer the ANC that people know, the ANC of Nelson Mandela and other striking icon. It has changed completely. It is no longer a vehicle or agent of change. People no longer have confidence in the ANC. It has become one of the most corrupt ruling party one has ever had. And of course, they have become very violent. You would not believe that in my organization, we have lost about 18 activists, who have been killed. mostly by politicians, the police, the militarized private security guards, with impunity and with no justice, no arrest, no investigation, no prosecution of anybody. Because the lives of Black people in South Africa, particularly the poor, counts for nothing. So this is what we are confronted with. The ANC has become a repressive organization. In fact, when you vote for the ANC, we always say to our movement, you're actually voting for your own grave, because the very same people that will kill you are from the very same people that were once the hope of South Africa and many people around the world. So the message is to say the ANC is no longer a hope for South Africa, and it has lost all its respect and integrity that it once had, because the ANC has actually been hijacked by mafias and gangsters that are a danger to society, that have become danger to our own communities.
I mean, is that maybe a way for people to understand to some degree, because, a lot of what we get in the U.S. media is just sort of the power struggle, the Ramaphosa versus Zuma or whatever. I mean, is it sort of no honor amongst thieves kind of situation?
Well, nobody is better than the other, but the reality is that there was too much corruption and state looting under the administrative of the former President Jacob Zuma. Today, we have a number of commissions that are trying to investigate all the crimes that have been committed under his presidency. We have the so-called Zondo Commission, which is really, because the state has been captured. So it's a commission that is really investigating it's a state capture commission, which tells you that the extent of looting was not only by the South African. There were business people from outside South Africa who were telling South Africa what to do. They would go to an extent of appointing cabinet ministers. You can actually see that we've never been in charge of our own country, even our own president. Now, Ramaphosa is one of the richest president in Africa. So for him, just like the former US President Donald Trump, we wonder what is it that he wants in power when he has the power of money. And of course, you would understand that there are, imperialists behind and working to accumulate capital, which really is taken out of the country. South Africa is supposed to be rich, but the poor, there's a lot of poor people. All the wealth is taken out of the country, to prioritize those who are there to loot and, accumulate profit at the expense of poverty of many people who are actually working hard. This needs to come to an end.
We've had this social explosion, which has obviously, well, at least it's enlightened the world, I think, to many of these challenges you've laid out. For you all in the Shack Dwellers movement and maybe the sort of popular movement more broadly, where does the struggle go after this?
Well, it's so difficult to tell. However, the same time of or moment of crisis like this really provides for us an opportunity to rethink our politics, to rethink ourselves. And it cannot be business as usual. There needs to be an inclusive economy. There needs to be, a new government that would be created by people from below. So it is high time that civil society organizations and grassroots formations really come into play, because I think we've made a biggest mistake to leave politics in the hands of the politicians who are now abusing that power, when the rest of the society in South Africa, including churches, have surrendered politics. So I think it's high time that civil society and grassroots formation and democratic formations, trade unions and so on, needs to come together and to say, we're not going to give our country to the politicians. They have failed, they have been dishonest, they have looted, then they cannot be trusted. So I think this moment of crisis is really offering us another opportunity to rethink our politics and to rather build an inclusive economy that will be inclusive of ordinary men and women in rural villages, in townships, in the shack settlement. So it's high time that we really come together and say, how do we build this country in a manner that includes everybody, in a manner that treats everybody with respect and dignity. That is what we are lacking today.
Mm-hmm. Well, Sabu, I'll just ask you this finally. Anything you want to leave people with who are seeing the images there in South Africa over on this side of things?
Yes, there's one thing that people outside South Africa should know, that, of course, poor people are hungry, they need food, but what is most important also about this current situation of the food riots that we see today is that it looks like there has been an attempted coup. We are saying that because we are getting reports from the state security agencies, from the intelligence, that they are mastermind behind these riots, which implicates the former president who is arrested as we speak. Those state agencies have worked close with him and in solidarity with him. It's been very clear and evident in South Africa. The former military, the so-called Mkhonto Wesizwe military veterans, were protecting the homes of the former president to make sure that he is not arrested, and they vowed in a broad daylight that they will do whatever it takes to protect him. And one of the ways in which they do to protect him is to vandalize the country. So if you cannot, if they cannot win in terms of protecting the president, then they want the country to burn, and this is what we are facing. So there are reports that have leaked from the state security agencies that there are masterminds who are highly trained to cause this havoc, so that it can pressure the head of state to release the state president. But at the same time, there are two factions of the ANC that are infighting today, which are vandalizing this country. So this country is being destroyed by the very same people who claim to be custodians of our democracy. This is what we are confronted with. And it is high time that the people of South Africa, ordinary men and women, this country is not owned by politicians, it is owned by its people. It is high time that they come. And our message to shack dwellers, to all those who are Democrats, who love democracy and who have love for their country and humanity, we are calling for calm in South Africa, and we think we have the duty and responsibility to call for peace and stability. And we think we have that capacity. We hope that our people will respect this call and make sure that we defend our hard-won democracy. So this constitutional democracy has been fought for. People had given their lives, so it cannot be hijacked by a few individuals who wants to enrich themselves at the expense of poverty that we all see.
Well, Sabu Zikwode from the Shack Dwellers Movement, we really appreciate you giving us some time and joining us here on the Freedom Side on Breakthrough News.
Thank you so much. Thanks to all your viewers and listeners at home.
Right on. Thanks so much. Well, Rania, I have to say, I mean, in that last piece there, potential attempted coup, the potential descent of the country into a worse situation. I mean, it's certainly, I mean, it is disheartening, I think, as Sabu was laying out there. I mean, to see the promise of the liberation struggle here. But, I will say, and I didn't mention this one, the Shack Dwellers Movement has been growing quite a bit over the past year alone. I mean, I have thousands and thousands of members. So, heartening to see that people are getting organized.
It's and I think it's a very crisis of capitalism kind of rage in the streets that, of course, also gets manipulated by various political power players, like he was mentioning, using the street to your advantage when you can't get your way politically, which happens a lot here in Lebanon. In fact, happened a lot today. And on and on and on in every country, in Venezuela, and on and on and on. And so it was interesting to get that perspective and a breakdown to understand what's happening in that country, because oftentimes the news is just this very chaos in an African country, and people are rioting because they're poor, and that's it.
That is it.
That's it.
I mean,
you don't
really is
literally.
It's like
a cookie cutter story. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
that's, you know,
I did
what
want to use this
people
opportunity.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I want to use it as an opportunity. I'm so grateful that we were able to have a South African guest who's so involved in movement building to discuss what's happening there, which is why you should support Breakthrough News. Go to patreon.com/Breakthrough News, become a patron so we can keep bringing you voices like the one you just heard from. Or, of course, you can throw money in the super chat where we will read your comment on air. And sorry, Eugene, I interrupted you.
No, you didn't interrupt me. That's most important. It's more important than anything I was going to say. I was just going to say shout out to Al and shout out to Raymond who made donations there while we were talking to Sabu. But no, you were right to break in. You reminded me about the importance of this actually at the beginning of the show.
Yes.
So I want people to know you're the financial guru as well of Breakthrough News.
Well, I want people to know how they can support us because so often they want to and they're not sure quite like how they can do it. And this is one way it makes our programs possible. Eugene, of course, does the Daily Punch Out, which is a podcast of the daily news from Eugene's perspective. That is a must listen. It's my go-to every single day. And then, of course, there's my program, Rania Kalik Dispatches, which you can listen to as a podcast or you can watch on the Breakthrough News YouTube channel. And I'm so happy we're able to bring these programs, plus on-the-ground reporting. Eugene was in Haiti recently. Hopefully we can send him back there soon to go update his reports on what's happening. So much happening at Breakthrough News. And we've got one of the only labor. I think we have one of the only labor reporters in the country at this point. No one's reporting on labor anymore.
Yes,
and that is
Monica
a good
Cruz,
segue into our next.
Monica Cruz. Some might say Monica Cruz with the news. I believe she's here.
Yes.
We're about to find out. I hope she's
We're about to find out.
Right.
We hope she's here to bring you some of her latest on what's happening in the labor struggle.
Anywhere you get your podcast, you can see on the picket line. Here on the picket line, her podcast, which is on labor news every week. You wish more people had heard about these things. So a lot of things you probably haven't heard. Monica, there you are.
Here I am. Happy to be here. How y'all doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. How are you?
Good. Excited to join the live show for the first time. It's been a couple months. Yeah,
it has. Well, we're very happy
to tune in.
to
a fantastic
have you.
Show.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And of course, you have covered a range of issues. One of the issues I know you have covered quite extensively here is the, I believe it's Brookwood, Alabama, the miners' strike that's been happening there against Warrior Met Coal. The Scrooge type of company. I mean, really just disgusting on so many different levels here. It's been, how long has this been going on for, Monica?
3 months, Eugene. It's been going on since April 1st. That was the day after their contract expired. These are members of the United Mine Workers of America down in Brookwood, Alabama, the local down there. And I mean, it's just really heroic, the struggle that they have waged since the beginning of April. I was honored to join them on the picket lines out there at the mines at Warrior Met Mines in Tuscaloosa County on their second weekend of striking. It was actually the day after they had voted to reject the first contract offer that management had put forward to them. These workers are literally responsible for saving the company from bankruptcy some 5 or 6 years ago, and they accepted the horrible terms of that contract, including an average of $6 an hour pay cut, more expensive health care, and this ridiculous 3-strike call-out policy. A lot of these miners are family men who, have children to take care of, partners, households to take care of. They can't even call out, to take care of their kids if they're sick, or to even call out for a doctor's appointment themselves. And they have faced a lot of intimidation and violence on the picket lines, arrest, and a whole host of other issues. So it's really incredible to see this effort being pushed forward in Alabama, a right-to-work state, of course.
Well, we are very honored to be joined here as we continue the show as well by Mike Wright, who is a mine worker on strike with UMWA Local 2397 in Brookwood, Alabama. Mike, thank you so much for being with us here.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Monica.
Yes, Mike, thanks so much for joining us. Now, you may remember meeting me at the Union Hall down in Brookwood. My first time in Alabama, I was coming down there like, "Hi, I'm the Yankee reporter here to talk to y'all
I got
about
you.
why
I
you're
remember.
Yes, to talk to y'all about why y'all are on strike. So I would love to hear, so much has unfolded since that second weekend that I was down there with y'all. Can you talk about perhaps one of the, or I mean, I shouldn't say perhaps, definitely the most egregious unfolding of this story, which is the vehicular attacks that y'all have been victims to down there at the picket lines in Brookwood. Can you talk about what's been going on with these assaults on you all strikers and your families as well?
Well, definitely, our guys have been on the picket lines, and we've had, I want to say, maybe 2 to 3 instances where we've been, someone has tried to hit, and I think maybe 2 of our people were hit by, I don't know if it was company people that were driving these vehicles that hit some of our guys. I think maybe a week or 2 ago, one of the coal miners' wives got hit by someone driving a vehicle, and it's just crazy, man. I mean, we're trying to just do a peaceful protest as far as trying to get protest and let the company know what we want, what we trying to get. We just want the bare minimum as far as what we get, as far as what we lost. You're just trying to get that back, and it's been tough. It's been tough, but we just trying to continue to keep our guys encouraged. It's just a struggle, just trying to get this company basically to respect us, and that's where we're at. I mean, it's crazy. These guys have been picketing. We've been picketing 24/7, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I mean, holidays. We just had one 4th of July, and we've had people out there on the picket line protesting, trying to get this company to understand that we mean business. We want what we deserve. So that's basically it on that.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly right. And for our viewers, you just watched a really just terrifying video of this truck just straight ramming into the line out here in Brookwood, Alabama. And there's a few videos that I've seen circulating online in different news reports, local news reports down there in Alabama. And I mean, it's just inexcusable. There's no other way to describe those incidents except straight up attacks on you all strikers. Mike, can you talk about what your demands are in terms of this new contract and and how this connects to the fact that y'all saved the company from bankruptcy?
Well, as far as personally for me, I want what we had before this that last contract. We had 100% insurance. I want 100% insurance back because 80/20 insurance don't work for a coal miner. It just don't work for us. I mean, we go underground, we're inhaling stuff, uh, uh, diesel fumes, all these different things that, coal dust, all these different things that we inhale. We deserve top of the line insurance because that's what we had before the last contract that we just worked out of. We had 100% insurance. And I think we deserve that because, like I said, and I always use this particular analogy, what they presented to us is basically what we voted down is basically like trying to put 87 gas in a Benz. That doesn't work for 87 gas don't work for a Benz. You got to put 93 octane in that car because that's what it's designed to have. So we as coal miners, we are designed to have 100% insurance because of what we go through and what we deal with when we go underground. We want time and a half after 8 hours. That's what we used to have. We used to get holidays off. Our holidays were optional. You could actually work it, and if you wanted to. But this particular company makes us work the holidays, and you have to take it later. Take it, however long later that you decide to take it, you have to do it. I think they gave us like 60 days to take that day off. And, of course, the holiday is gone. Your family's back to work. You basically taking that holiday by yourself. So we looking to get that stuff. We want the premium times back. We want all of those things back that we lost. And like I said, that's the bare minimum. That's just the minimum. And that's all. We just want that back. And I feel like after we get that back, as far as that'll be a foundation of what we can start to build on. Just getting back to that is what we're asking for. I don't think we're asking for much, but the company is basically telling us we don't even deserve what we had as far as in the old contract, the one we just worked out of. They're telling us we didn't even deserve that. That's crazy to me, because we're the ones that saved this company. We brought this company back out of bankruptcy. So I think we deserve even just the integrity, the way they treat us is one huge thing. We just want to be respected, as coal miners, we want to be respected. So personally, that's what I want back as far as our insurance, our time after 8 hours, our double time on Sundays, our premium times. We want that back because I think we deserve it. And it is sad because we're having to fight to get the bare minimum. That's crazy to me. So we're just trying to get that back. And, we got families. All of us have families that we're taking care of and trying to take care of. We agreed to these cuts, like it was stated $6 an hour cut. We agreed to that so we could stay a union. And we just want that back. That's basically it.
Mike, yeah, it's really shameful to think that they can't even put y'all back on the standard that you were at before this new contract, considering in this past year and a half of the pandemic. I remember when I was with you at the Union Hall, local 2397 Union Hall out in Brookwood, and you were showing me this plaque that y'all got from from the corporate headquarters, whatever, that was commending y'all for making record profits, for bringing Warrior Mines record profits, profits they had never seen at the mines before. And to think that they can't even raise their standard of how they pay you and the benefits that they offer to meet with all of the work and all of the profits that you have earned for them, for the CEO who made some $3 or $4 million in 2020 alone. Speaking of, the folks who make these millions, these billions, even trillions of dollars off of the Warrior Met mines. I know a group of y'all on strike came up to my stomping grounds here in New York City to take the picket line to BlackRock hedge funds, of course, a global multi-trillion-dollar investment firm, the largest investor in the mines. Can you talk about why you all thought it was so important to send a small contingent of y'all strikers to come and bring this message to BlackRock?
Well, we just wanted them to know, what we're going through down here in Alabama. We wanted to protest and let the investors know, what's going on down here. It's a lot of things that's going on. They might not even know that's going on. I've heard that. I want to say that one or two of the investors have pulled out. I'm not sure about that, but that's what I heard. And, I wouldn't want to put my money into something that's not giving me a good return. So, but we wanted to go up there and just, protest and let people know up there what's going on down here. Like I said, and I'm just speaking from the heart. This is really personal to me. I've invested 16 years into this place. All of my chips are in. They're all out on the table. There's nothing to hide. You know, I don't have anything else that's here that I can pull from to make all the ends meet. I have to do things that I have to do, but at the same time, all of my chips are in here. You know, my seniority, all of that stuff is on the table. I'm willing to fight to get what we deserve. I'm willing to fight as long as it takes to get what we deserve. Because, like I said, you know, my daughter, my oldest daughter, was 7 years old when I started working here. She's 23 now. She's about to be 24 years old. And I got my youngest daughter just turned 14. And she wasn't even born when I started working here. That's all they know as their dad is a coal miner. That's all they know. And so it's real personal to me. I want to make sure that we get what we're supposed to have. But like I said, as far as the guys going up to New York, we want to let the guys know that's invested into this place, that own this place, that owns this coal mines, what's going on down here. The guys are very passionate and very serious about their taking care of their families. And that's basically all we want to do. We want to take care of our families and have a decent life. So we're willing to go to let the investors know what's going on down here. So, and, you know, we're willing to do whatever it takes. We're willing to fight for however long it takes. We have a slogan down here, one day longer, one day longer. We're willing to go one day longer to let this company know that we mean business, because we're going to get what we're supposed to have. That's the goal.
It's really incredible to see y'all's resolve. And yeah, I remember hearing that at the picket lines as well. One day longer, one day stronger. And one thing I also wanted to talk to you about and ask you about that I thought was a really beautiful and you know, more positive piece of this story was just the incredible amount of support that y'all have gotten from the community, you know, talking about these family values. It's really incredible to see family members and community members of Brookwood come through and do, you know, a strike pantry, like what's being organized by Local 2397's auxiliary, led by a lot of women, a lot of wives of y'all on strike, and also to see the Strike Fest that was organized by some local labor activists and also new labor reporters like myself down there in Alabama. So can you talk about some of these mutual aid efforts, as you know, y'all have been forfeiting your salaries for now 3 months?
Well, we've had tremendous support from the community. People coming by as we're on the picket lines. There's people that have come by, brought food out to the guys that's on strike, that's picketing. The strike pantry thing is really a blessing. Whenever we are at our rallies, it's really been a blessing to me. I know that I'm able to take some stuff home and not have to use that particular money that I'm saving or trying to keep to go and buy groceries, because those things have been provided for us while we're on strike. And that's really been a blessing. I thank God for how that has worked out for us. We so much as far as being donated to us and given to us that I've had to give it away to some other people. So it's really been a blessing. But like I said, as far as the community have really, really stepped up on our behalf to help us out. People have stopped and just talked to us, want to know if we need anything, just to, you know, tell us, hey guys, we're on your team, we're on your side. You guys are gonna make it through this. Continue to hold the line. There's people that's come through that have, you know, just blow the horn, just letting us know that they're with us, and we just glad for that. Like I said, I just believe that at the end of this, we're gonna get exactly what we're supposed to have. I don't know, like I said, exactly how long we're gonna be out here, but I know that in the end, it's gonna be what the goal that we are trying to reach is going to be met. So I think that, you know, God is definitely in our corner. That's really the main thing. Is definitely on our side. The scripture teaches us that if it had not been for the Lord who was on our side, the enemy would have destroyed us. But we're still here. You know, 2397 a local, 2245. I want to say that's 4 is local. We're still here. The company and everything that they came to bust this union, break this union, but we're still standing strong and we're still holding the line. And like I said, we got a lot of guys with resolve. Some of us may be getting a little weary, but we want to just stay encouraged. I want to, you know, tell the guys, I try to tell them, stay encouraged, hang in there. We're going to make it. So we just got to keep fighting and hang on in there one day longer, one day stronger. We just got to keep the line and hold the line. So that's, you know, I think that's the heart of all of our guys. Is just to hang in there, because like I said, we got families. All of us have families that we're trying to feed and support, and that's the main thing. It's all our families, and I thank God for all of these guys. We're just gonna hang in there and do what we gotta do.
Right on.
Michael Wright, thank you so much. 16-year vet of the Warrior Met Mines down in Brookwood, Alabama, UMWA Local 2397 member on strike, 3rd month in a row. And I know y'all will be sending a larger group of miners up here to New York City to protest outside of Black Rock. Again, I am so excited to join y'all again on the picket line here in Manhattan in a couple of weeks from now. And we are so honored. We are so grateful to continue to cover y'all's struggle here on Breakthrough News. Thank you so much for taking your time to join us, Mike.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And Monica, thank you, by the way, for bringing us this story and everything that you bring us, of course, on the picket line. Where can, or I guess where, obviously, Breakthrough News, but when should people be looking for On the Picket Line every week?
So we have a new time, Wednesdays at 7 p.m. for the show. You can find us on Apple, on Spotify, Google Podcasts. And if you want to, we already know, at BT Newsroom for Breakthrough News. If you want to follow my personal Twitter, where I'm posting a lot about labor struggles all across the country and even all across the world, you can follow me at Palante Mami. That's PALANTEMAMI. That's from the Puerto Rican Revolutionary slogan, Palante, siempre palante. So forward, always forward. Definitely in the spirit of the badass miners down in Brookwood. So thanks for having me.
Right on. No, Monica, really appreciate you joining us. Monica Cruz with the Labor News here on the Freedom Side. And, you know, amazing story there of the miners there in Alabama, Rania. I mean, you know, one thing, you know, that Brookwood Warrior Met Coal is now considered one of the 30 best stocks for hedge funds. So you can see right there that Wall Street now is actually 25, you know, Renaissance Technologies, these huge Renaissance Technologies is relatively famous, you know, because the Mercer, the people behind Breitbart or whatever, is one of the founders. So they give all this money to Republicans. But then the other guy, David Simon, gives a bunch of money to the Democrats and was a big supporter of Hillary Clinton. So shows you the two sides of the coin. But, you know, Wall Street trying to destroy these guys, you know, to make a bunch of money. And it's just, it's a terrible situation, but to see them fight back, it's powerful, powerful piece.
Indeed, indeed. It is good to see them fight back. And it's good to be able to have somebody like that on this program, because I don't see this covered anywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, very rarely do these kinds of things get covered. I actually that's why I think Monica's program is so important, because I learn about so much that's happening in the labor struggle across the country that I literally am like, why is there no one covering this?
Yeah, I mean, it's unbelievable in many ways that it's not front page news. But, you know, most major newspapers have gotten rid of their labor reporters. Well, one thing I just want to sneak in here quickly, some news that was sent to me just before we went on air. In David Wade Correctional Center, that's in Louisiana, there looks like about 20 inmates there are on a hunger strike. They've launched on a hunger strike Apparently almost no one is reporting this. This is why it was sent to me there, David Wade Correctional Center. They've gone on hunger strike, documenting a number of things here in terms of their conditions, extreme heat, the use of solitary confinement as punishment, all sorts of abuse, inhumane treatment, exposure to black mold, physical abuse from guards. I mean, sadly, these are things we hear about quite a bit when we're talking about the mass incarceration system here in the United States. Some of the people, it seems, were not even supposed to be in this prison, have been held there for whatever way, but they're trying to get more media attention here. David Wade Correctional Center, so look into this, fighting against extreme heat, other forms of abuse there in Louisiana, which I have to say has one of the most brutal prison systems in the country, although, I mean, you know, that's a macabre competition there. So David Wade Correctional Center in Louisiana.
Louisiana literally has former slave plantations that have been transformed into prisons where people actually labor for almost no wages.
In Angola, they still pick cotton.
Yes, Angola.
They have a rodeo there. You know, they say it's such
almost
a great thing.
Almost entirely Black prisoners. And, you know, it makes me think of the fact that the Senate passed this bill yesterday to support the banning of imports of any products that are produced in Xinjiang, based on these in China, based on these very questionable testimonies of forced labor in Xinjiang. And that's where they're saying where all these products are coming from. And all I can think when I saw that, aside from all of the disinformation around that and the questionable sources they're coming from, people like Adrian Zenz, beyond that, all I could think was, we have prison labor in America. No one's calling for banning that. I mean, it's completely political, obviously, these kind of like economic and financial sanctions and bans that the U.S. is trying to place in its Cold War with China, but just the pure hypocrisy. When you have prisoners, like you just said, going on a hunger strike. I mean, do you know how hard it is to even get to organize in a prison? I'm not asking you, I'm asking our viewers. I know you know how hard it is. But to organize in a prison where you have really no access to the outside world, just to even get out to people and publicize that there's a hunger strike happening in prison, let alone actually organizing with other prisoners who have conflict with each other. I mean, prisons are organized in such a way to like group people off into gangs that are always in conflict with each other and commit violence against each other. Prisons in America are a very brutal place. And so for people to be able to move past that and organize a hunger strike shows the level of misery and suffering that must be taking place in the confines of those prison walls.
No, absolutely. I think that's an extraordinarily good point. I mean, the level of hypocrisy is outrageous. I mean, not only do we have forced labor, but, you know, I mean, a lot of these companies that employ people too in prisons, there's one, the name is escaping me, it's like a call center. The way they will set it up is they say, well, we're actually good. Because since no one will employ you, because no one wants to employ the formerly incarcerated, we actually will help you get a leg up. So it's almost like not only are you imprisoned, but they're forcing you to work to even have the opportunity when you get out to have a decent standard of living. I mean, it's so perverse on so many levels, everything from
forced
call
labor
centers to the wrapping of video games, packaging of them, to we could go on and on. It's disgusting.
Manufacturing bras and underwears for Victoria's Secret.
Yes.
Happens in prisons in America for slave wages.
Well, here's another
$1
one for
a day.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to add that they also, California relies on prison labor to fight its wildfires for, I think, also $1 a day, something ridiculous, like putting your life at risk to fight the state's wildfires, to the point where Kamala Harris, people might remember, actually opposed allowing nonviolent offenders out of prisons due to overcrowding in California prisons, because she asked, but where are we going to get people to fight our fires?
It's such a good point. And, you know, right now people are actually complaining because of COVID-19. You know, they furloughed some people and they say, we don't have enough of these prisoners to throw into the wildfires. And it was such a bad idea to furlough these people because of COVID-19. So it gets so deep. You know, if a Humvee gets blown up somewhere in America, it's repaired by prisoners. The uniforms of the U.S. military made by prisoners, the federal prison company, Unicorps. So a huge piece of the military-industrial complex also taking place in the federal prison labor in the federal system, that is.
But let's sanction and China and ban imports from Xinjiang because some German Christian anti-Semite said there's forced labor there.
Right.
I mean, that's literally what's happening. Meanwhile, what's happening in our own country, like no one's talking about it. It's not controversial. It's just the way it is.
Right.
Don't ask questions and move on.
Don't ask questions. That's the key part right there. Well, we do
Right.
ask the questions. And in fact, as someone said earlier in the super chat, Rania, you are the best journalist working in the English language. So you're asking all
I think
the
that's,
hard
I would say
questions.
you are. I would say you are. So let's,
Well-
I like this. I like this. This should be like a segment where we just compliment each other.
We just go back and forth.
No, you're
Well,
amazing. No, you're amazing.
You are. Well, as always, it is my pleasure to be here alongside of you. Just for people to remember, if you want to hear more of the dispatches from Rania Khalek, On the Picket Line from Monica Cruz, It's Not You, It's Capitalism, The Punch Out, The Freedom Side, you can go to patreon.com/breakthrough news, become a patron. Your patronage helps push us forward. Patreon.com/breakthrough news. Shout out to everyone who watched. Shout out to everyone who donated in the super chat as well. And as always, we'll be back with you next Thursday.
Yeah. Bye, guys.
Revolution knows no compromise. Revolution overturns and destroys everything that gets in its way.